Okay, so I would say we should start. Welcome, everyone. We are very happy to hold today our first book club on Invisible Women. So this is a book by Carolina Criado Perez, and Sana and I will be your moderators for today. We are the communication co-leads of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the European Sleep Research Society. So before we move on, we would just like to ask whether anyone would like not to be recorded. So if that's the case, please turn off your camera now, so that you are not on recordings that might be shared in the future via YouTube or ESRS. And also please keep your phone close to you because there's only two activities that will need your phone and a camera. So to start today for the agenda, we will meet for around 1 hour. We will start by introducing a little bit the work that we do in our committee, an overview of the book, so Invisible Women, its relevance to EDI and sleep research. Then we will dive in a discussion around two themes that we derived from the book. And then we will also open the dialogue for you to share your insights and your personal perspectives on the topics that the book covers. And finally, we will finish with some key takeaways and the next steps. So who are we? As I mentioned, we are the EDI committee of ESRS. These lovely 10 people here on your left. Our mission is to promote equality, diversity, and inclusion across sleep research and, of course, also clinical practice. So our aim is indeed to support inclusive research design, careers, and building community culture. So what we do, we try to gather evidence on EDI topics among the ESRS community through surveys, and then use that information to develop policies and then input those into ESRS. So for instance, we have been developing a code of conduct for Sleep Europe in October, also an internal EDI policy for ESRS. So these are just examples of what we do in the backstage. And then regarding community initiatives, this book club is one of them, but we are also offering childcare grants for individuals that have caregiving responsibilities. So if you want to know more about us and our work, please do visit our website. So before we really dive in the discussion of the book, we just want to establish a few shared guidelines to create a respectful and open space. So, of course, this is a safe and inclusive environment. We want to exchange ideas and experiences. So we welcome different perspectives. And of course, disagreement is natural and very valuable, but we want to keep the tone respectful and constructive. So please do be mindful about the topics that might be personal or sensitive. So speak from your own perspective and also allow space for multiple voices. So we as moderators may occasionally invite quieter participants to speak, or we might also move gently the discussion forward if it becomes, for instance, too technical. So you as participants are very much welcome to participate. So do raise your hand in Zoom when you'd like to intervene. Also, please do share your thoughts in the chat. We will be attentive to both. And also let's bear in mind that professional experience, but also lived experience are equally valid in the discussion of today. So our goal is not dialogue, is not really debate. We don't want to be here debating. We want to have a conversation. So we appreciate that everyone helps to really maintain a thoughtful and supportive atmosphere in this next hour.
Okay, thank you, Ines, for that introduction. So let's just do a quick activity. So to just warm us up, we would love to hear in one word, how did this book make you feel? So you can grab your phone and scan this QR code, so the word would just come up on the screen, or if you are not comfortable with the screen, you can just write down in the chat. Yeah, I'm seeing awake, angry, sympathetic, seen, frustrated, shock. Thank you. Thank you all for your responses. Enlightened. Okay. Okay. Thank you all for your responses. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so before we move on to the introduction, we would like to briefly ground us in the core thesis of the Invisible Woman. So Caroline argues that much of the world is designed using data based primarily on men. This doesn't necessarily mean women are intentionally excluded, but rather that they are often not measured. The key idea is the gender data gap, not absence of women as people, but absence of women in data sets. When women's data aren't collected, analyzed, or disaggregated, blind spots emerge in medicine, urban planning, workplace design, safety, and technology. So these spots are systemic, not random. So, as you read the book, what example stood out to you as most surprising or unsettling? I would just encourage one or two quick responses before we move forward. You can write down in your chat if you're not comfortable opening up your camera or mic. Any short examples? That
Please,
was
Sarah.
very, yeah.
I think the thing that I found the most striking was the use of the male sex as like the neutral gender in everyday life. And I've obviously heard of this and I'm aware of it, but I didn't realize just how invasive it was. Not invasive, but yeah, so prevalent. Yeah, so I think that's probably for me the most eye-opening uh, thing.
I can relate that as well. Thank you for sharing. Okay, anybody else want to go? Okay, there's one thing in the chat. I was shocked to learn that working spaces and equipments are designed for men, creating even security issues for women. Yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing, Irene. Okay, next slide, please.
I think Dragana also has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I just put it up.
Mm.
Yeah, so I read the book quite some years ago. So yesterday I was going over it to kind of remember my notes and but one thing that really stuck with me was about urban planning and open spaces and transportation, and I think it was kind of mentioned in different chapters. So yeah, those I mean there are many eye-opening parts, but
Yeah. Yeah, there are many eye-opening, and I'm sure we might like this 1 hour would not be enough to discuss all of them. Yeah. So thank you for sharing. Next slide, please. Yeah, so let's connect this directly into our field of sleep research. So male bodies and life patterns have often been treated as the default in biomedical research. Sex and gender specific differences are frequently underexplored. Study design, recruitment, and outcomes measures are all affected by this. So the key question becomes who is implicitly assumed when we design standard protocols and who might be neglected?
And with this, we enter in our first thematic discussion. So one of the themes that we thought it would be interesting to discuss with you from sleep research or neurological research is the gender data gap, specifically in health research. So we know that this gap is the hidden absence of data that shapes what we consider to be normal in research, policies, and technologies. So it's not really often about intentional bias, but more about defaults that we rarely question, particularly in our own scientific work. And so these topics that we would like to discuss further are within part 4 of the book, which is called Going to the Doctor. These are chapters 10 and 11, so the drugs don't work and Yentl syndrome. So here Caroline really emphasizes that, as Sana was saying, male bodies are historically treated as the default research subject. So we know about this male norm of the 70 kilogram man used for a lot of older studies. Then on the other hand, sex-specific symptoms are also under-recognized or misdiagnosed, and Caroline really makes a strong case on a diverse set of diseases, even if it's prevalence or the course of the disease or its severity. And then one that I think, at least for me, it was quite striking, is the lack of disaggregated data really masking inequality. So it's not just enough to include women, which are not included as much in both preclinical and clinical studies, but it's really about really sex disaggregating this data and presenting the results in a separate way. So with this, in these chapters, well, as I was mentioning, Perez really describes these inequalities, and she also mentions how many drug trials historically were tested primarily on men, even if conditions affected everyone, as for instance, sleep disturbances, right, as we know. And even so, in diseases that affected particularly women, they were still being tested on men. So with this in mind, I would like to open this question for discussion. Where do you think gender data gaps are still persistent in sleep research or in clinical sleep medicine? Can you think of examples of your own work or within papers that you have read that can illustrate this? Please do feel free to participate in the chat or also unmuting yourself. Yeah, go ahead, Saren.
I think that what you said was really poignant, but I think that what we often do in sleep medicine and research, well, at least clinically, I found is that sometimes we're ignoring the realities that a lot of women specifically face, especially those that have fragmented sleep as a result of caregiving responsibilities, or even older adults who often maybe need to get up because of chronic pain or use of the bathroom. There is some like really good research on shift workers, but yeah, these kinds of individuals, I think, are being a little bit overlooked. And I think it really biases the normative data that we collect, and also what the thresholds for specific diagnoses are, and that ultimately would skew sort of intervention outcomes. So maybe like the design of even how we collect sleep study data is being impacted by this.
Yeah, thank you so much for your reflection. It's indeed, I think you raised two very important points, which is on one hand, how we design studies, right? So oftentimes it's not really about deliberate exclusion, but just like some sort of methodological inertia, I would say, like to change or to include or to be aware even that we might be excluding participants just due to our criteria. And then on the other hand is what are the implications of these exclusions, right? So what does this tell us then of the results that we obtain, right? If we ignore part of the population that indeed has sleep disturbances, if we are studying sleep disturbances, right? Insomnia. Yeah, thank you so much for raising those points. And yes, please do participate, Irene.
Thank you. Hi. Yeah,
Hello.
I was also thinking when I was reading the book, she analyzes a lot how language can be, well, not gender neutral and oftentimes implicitly masculine
Yeah.
or male oriented. And I was wondering how maybe sleep questionnaires, they could be somehow yeah, like gender blind or designed to use language which with women might not relate or yeah, I don't know. Well, she makes a lot of examples, good cases about how sometimes I think it's with teaching evaluation, right? Like how
Yes.
you pose the questions and what kind of language you use can make women react one way or another. And I was thinking, I don't know, maybe that could happen with some sleep questionnaires.
Exactly, yeah, right. The way that we are framing the questions, or yes, or even the questions themselves might be excluding already from the beginning some of these participants, or participants might not identify with these questions. So then their answers are not as assertive as they could be if the language used would be different. That's a very good point. Dragana, please.
Another aspect, I think, is the influence of hormones on sleep quality, which I think hasn't been
Yeah.
accounted for enough. There's across the menstrual cycle, but also when women have these big transitions like menopause, which seems to have some kind of influence on both brain clearance and also development into neurodegenerative diseases. So yeah, that's I think that's definitely an area of sleep research that is yet to be developed.
Yeah, definitely. And also even perimenopausal women, right? Or even pregnant women. I feel there's really a lot of different um, populations that are not being properly included in sleep studies because they are considered maybe outside of the scope or as outliers, let's say. And actually, it would be quite valuable to have them as well. So, yeah, very good point. I just noticed in the chat, Elena wrote that I'll just open it bigger for me. Since historically studies were mostly done on males, I wonder how many studies today, including women, are based on wrong assumptions, generalizing the results of the older seminal studies. Yes, definitely, right? All of the studies that we are conducting currently are based on seminal studies that were mainly done in males. Also, a lot of preclinical studies, right, mainly done on male rats, male mice. So it really raises the question how these results translate to women and to half of the population that we are studying. So in this frame, I would like to ask you a further question. So how do you think our sleep studies might or should look like if we started designing for women or these groups to be included too? So Irene already said, right, including more inclusive language on questionnaires, but what other measures could we apply? Yes, please.
So I work in preclinical research and we work with mice. And in our case, for example, we are including females in the study and training the students to follow the cycles of the female mice so we can track better any potential changes. But it's not a widely implemented practice, so we are working closely with the vets and the NACOs and everyone involved in animal care and animal welfare because it's relatively new. But in our case, the way to try to fill the gap is really trying to include them and also account for their physiological differences in a way that the results are meaningful.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I also from my own perspective, I also do preclinical research and I fully agree with you. It should not even be a question whether we include females or not, right? And then on the other hand, also from my own research, what I realized is that even though I am including females, I'm not sex disaggregating the data. So then in the end I'm including everything in the same bag and generalizing, but there is value in disaggregating data, particularly in some fields, right? For me, neurodegeneration, it's also valuable apart from sleep research. So indeed being aware of the constraints and trying to fill the gap. And also Dragana wrote in the chat that adding questions on menstrual cycle, definitely, and some conditions such as PCOS, PMDD, yes, all super valid. Irene?
Yeah, thank you. So I think it is also important that we, and actually the author does it in the very beginning of the book, that we distinguish between sex and gender.
Yeah.
Because, well, that's a prevailing trend in biomedical research in general, but in my PhD, I'm specifically analyzing this confusing of the terms in sleep research, and it's very frequent, unfortunately. And when we conflate or confuse sex and gender, we normally, from what I've seen, gender is used for everything, even when it's the analysis is sex related, or maybe sleep differences because of sex characteristics. But gender is a whole different thing, and
Yes.
It also affects sleep. So it's problematic that we have this conflation. I think that's really important.
Definitely, yeah. And also to make this clear in the questionnaires as well, right? Like, what gender does someone identify with, right? Apart from just sex, disaggregating the data, definitely. Okay, thank you so much for all of your insights. Due to sake of time, we will move to the next theme, but brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next theme is based on from fairness to scientific rigor. So this theme draws on multiple chapters from the book, particularly the introduction and the health and medical research sections, where Caroline shows that exclusion doesn't just produce inequality, it produces backed science. So bias leads to inadequate or harmful medical guidelines, such as incomplete, incorrect science, and unsafe practice, which further leads to loss of scientific rigor. Exclusion of women framed historically as methodological convenience. Lack of reproducibility, adverse drug reactions, and failed translation. Lack of diversity further reduced generalizability and scientific validity. So EDI improves validity, reproducibility, and impact. So for our discussion, the discussion prompt would be, how does EDI can strengthen rigor, reproducibility, and scientific quality? Can you relate some live experience from your background, like in your field, and share it with us?
I think Seren has the hand raised in the chat.
I think generally my view on this is that EDI, it improves the diversity of the sample, which can make your findings more generalizable, more robust. And that's why if you're including sort of underrepresented groups, then your risk profiles, your symptom presentations, the treatment response, they reflect sort of the real world populations. Again, I come from like a clinical background, specifically in obstructive sleep apnea, and the use of CPAP devices. I was, in diagnostics and treatment implementation, and I found that women and men, just anecdotally, would look for different things in the device, and they required different attention in certain areas. So if there was more research done on, I don't know, mask construction, or the pressure of a CPAP device not being overwhelming at the beginning of the night, for example, for women specifically, it would lead to better compliance. and therefore better outcomes overall. That's just my experience.
Yeah, I agree. So even my work is mostly clinical related. So I work on human population. So we always have different sets of demographic questions. But I am just thinking, what if I don't have the demographic part in my survey or in my questions? I cannot group them into certain group and then analyze my data. So it's very helpful to have those demographics.
Mm. Yeah.
Anybody else want to share or have some perspective with this thought?
Well, in preclinical research, as my field, I would say that following EDI actually saves you money because you have a better use of your animals, your results are stronger. And I work in sleep and epilepsy, and in this case, is very important because it happens in more kinds of epilepsy. In my animal model, females are more resilient than males. So actually, it's a different progression of the disease for me. So it's very important to account for that because then your results are clearer. You need to do less experiments. You publish quicker and better. So it's just better for in all aspects if you are able to follow.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's frame a question a different bit so that we can have more participations. So how does Invisible Woman challenge the idea that neutral science is unbiased?
So I would say that not measuring something is as bad as is as important as measuring something, right? So it's never neutral. I would say so a no choice is still a choice, right? So it is unbiased for sure. But I don't want to take the stage. Dragana, you had your hand up. Please do go.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just wanted to understand what you meant by neutral, but I understand it's just not using sex desegregation, the sex segregation. Um, yeah, I was kind of thinking that what you mean is more around our own internal beliefs, how they influence the science that we do, um, which it is indeed the case. But yeah, I do agree that. Without sex segregation, we are missing out on a lot of information and also more careful, maybe segregation, thinking about what kind of additional information we need from women and maybe both men, especially around where we are in the cycle, in life, and other types of changes that are happening. Also, maybe other factors, such as socioeconomic, that seem to have a big influence on sleep, wakefulness, rest in general.
Yeah. Thank you. So thank you everyone for sharing. So we are just moving on to next slide, which will be discussion more about the book. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so we have discussed these more like structured themes around the book, and now we want also to hear from your reflections, your own personal experience. So maybe to start, did anything in the book change the way you view your own work? Did it inspire you to maybe question your methods, to question your inclusion criteria, to question your analysis, your own internal beliefs, as Dragana was mentioning? Please do share with us.
Well, if I can say something, I would say it gives you tools to participate in conversations in which you can defend that is the right approach, because sometimes you have the intuition that is right to include both of them, but maybe you're not articulated enough to build your case. So it's great to have a book that actually give you examples, put you in the situation, and make you basically think from the perspective, right? So you can empathize easier with those situations, and then that's how you then remember them. So you can bring them back into a conversation with colleagues or friends. So that's what I got from the book mostly. Like, it's very good.
Thank you. Yeah, Seven?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I echo that point from Prius about how it provides evidence for the things that we all inherently, I'm as like maybe this is probably coming from the female perspective a little bit, but things that we're like inherently aware of. And it gives you this evidence. I think the thing that resonated with me the most is probably not, it doesn't really have to do with clinical practice or anything, but it really changed the way I looked at everything in my life. And like,
Yes, definitely.
this is a very basic example. My husband and I both have smartwatches. We got them at the same time, and his always calculates his steps like perfectly. And then mine never works. It wasn't until I read the book that I realized why that was, just because it was, even though I have the female or version of the watch, it still isn't actually, the algorithm doesn't work for me. It's not and my friends who have prams, their smartwatches, when they're holding the pram, isn't actually measuring their their pace. Like now, every time I can't open a packet or I look at just the way something's designed, I go, well, you know what? I don't think that this was designed with me in mind.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, but also enlightening or validating to know that it's not just me.
Yeah. I can fully relate. Actually, I'm currently in Switzerland, and I was never a very hiking enthusiast, but coming to Switzerland, kind of I had to become a hiking enthusiast. And then I remember buying my first hiking backpack and feeling somehow this is so absolutely uncomfortable. And my partner was wearing it as well, and for him, no problem. But for me, I felt this was not designed for me. I feel it's not properly fitting. It's too heavy. It's too uncomfortable. And then I discovered that there's actually female only designs, and I was like, okay, then I am not the only one feeling this. For me, it was the same. The book really was so eye-opening to things that I had absolutely no idea of, such as the schedules, right, of public transportation. It really blew my mind how it doesn't take into account caregiving persons, right, which are mainly women. So it was filled really with examples that were both infuriating, I should say, but at the same time also relatable. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Sedan. So, yeah, as a next question, maybe we could discuss a little bit what do you think are the barriers to change? This might be within indeed design or day-to-day life, but also within research. Like, what is really preventing us from closing this gap? If you have any thoughts on it. Dragana, please.
Thank you for sharing before. I really resonate with what you said. I think one barrier that might be kind of slowing down progress is thinking that we've come already far. So this is, I think, an opinion that's, of course, like the world now is very different from 30 years ago. But I mean, reading this book, it really shook a lot of my foundations of how I see the world, and like very sympathetic also for other women and men who are unaware of so many things. So I think putting it out there, kind of these like more nuanced issues and biases, it's very important work that also a lot of scientists will have to deal with in the future.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. Ludmila?
Yes, I was not so active so far because I didn't read the book yet, but I will.
It is a very good one, so we recommend here.
I think I read fragments, but not the whole one. But concerning the change, I'm pretty sure that people resist to accepting that this is necessary because it will maybe disqualify existing data sets. So this is a danger that many people who invested money and time in setting up big data sets are probably afraid of, I guess.
Yeah, that's a very good point. This resistance to change, right? If spending so much time and work on something that then ends up not being valid, but one can also argue that science is also about this, right? Science should be about realizing that something is wrong and replacing it by something that is more accurate. But you made a very good point. Thank you so much. Someone else would like to share?
I want to follow on this thing that we have gone far, but not too much. And I would say that the danger is that everything is now more subtle. Like before, the discrimination was very, very obvious. It's something that you could see, right? But now is the algorithm, is how things are designed. There are things that we have in our lives and they come to our lives in a certain way. And if we are not trained to think why they are designed in a certain way, it's the same as when you start doing science and you are like, in my case, for example, when I was doing my PhD, I was just presented with male mice and the research was done in male mice only. I never questioned that. It was like, for me, it was natural. It was like, yeah, that's how we do science.
Yeah.
And it was not because I wanted to discriminate female mice or I thought male mice were better. It's because the system was built in a certain way. And I think this book is very good at pointing that the problem now is not a raging misogyny, is something that has leaked into the foundations of how we understand society at many, many levels. And that is what I think is the most valuable thing from the book, at least for me, that it asks you to think and to question how things are designed and why they are designed that way.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I actually the comments in the chat also resonate a little bit with what you just mentioned. So Elena says, I think one big barrier is that people making decisions are still mostly men, and they will naturally see the world more from their perspective. So exactly not putting yourself in other people's shoes, right? This like implicit bias that you were mentioning, Prius. And Seren says, yeah, it's this unconscious bias, exactly. So we need to ask women, what do you think? They need to be in the room, right? We need to have them in the room. Irene is also backing this up, right? Yeah, women's issues should not be a niche, and unfortunately, they are still being seen as a niche. And it's important to really extend our audience to have men allyship, as Prius here today with us. It's great. And then, like wrapping this up a little bit, I wanted to ask you, what do you think it still needs to be done, like at an individual, institutional, and policy level? So Elena already kind of brought this a little bit up, right? So a big barrier is that most decisions are not made by women, so women are not so represented in positions of power. So this is something for sure to be done at institutional level. But what about at an individual level and a policy level? Do you have any thoughts that you'd like to share? Yes, Ludmila, please.
So I think including this, which is already on the way into research assessment, is a very powerful way because research assessment dictates what people actually do in their research, and if this kind of research projects are valued and make getting a position or funding more realistic, I think this will change a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Like funding opportunities that are targeted, right, and aimed at women, and also people that are more underrepresented, for sure. And Irene, please do.
Yeah, I also think maybe more education or more consciousness on gender perspective and feminist issues is important. Like this is maybe one thing I kind of disagree with the book, that only having more women in all these spaces, I don't think maybe is the definite solution, because we can of course think of women that are in charge, but they are anti-feminist. Even, I don't know, I'm thinking of Giorgia Meloni or people like this, like it's not only women, but actually having this gender perspective and this feminist perspective, because as Caroline even says in the book, you can be discriminated against without realizing. So we also need to take this step of what is discrimination, what is male biased, and have this consciousness.
Yes, do this deconstruction, right, of what are these preconceived bias, and really inform and making people aware of it. Actually, this is very interesting. We at the EDIC, we want to start doing this as well. Of course, we are tied to ESRS, so in the context of ESRS, but we want to start having more educational tools for people to be able to educate themselves, but also their organizations, their labs. So yeah, this is a very valid point. Thank you. Dragana, please.
Yeah, it overlaps with what I wanted to say, that now as scientists we also receive education on ethical principles, etc. And I think this falls in one of them. So definitely it's something that people entering the PhD level, they can be, there can be a section in some of their classes.
That's perfect.
Sorry. And on an institutional level, I think there are mechanisms that can kind of send out a message. For example, white papers that can be written by various organizations. I think, they do send out a kind of a strong message of attention on a particular topic.
Definitely, yeah. Actually, regarding white papers at EDI, we are also working on a white paper about EDI in sleep research in Europe. So stay tuned for this one. We are partnering with the ECN, so another committee from ESRS, focusing on early career researchers, and we are trying to really approach these topics and make a call of action for sleep research in Europe and EDI. And also going back to the first point that you said, I think it would also be interesting to discuss a little bit how EDI might look different for early career researchers versus PIs, specifically in the lab. So you were mentioning that there is this training for PhD students, right? You are trying to make it for PhDs to also have this EDI in mind. And I wonder how this would look like for PIs versus early career researchers, because, well, PhDs have different concerns and also act differently on the data, on the studies than PIs do. So how would this look different considering EDI at these two different levels? Ludmila?
Okay, so my thought on this would be that maybe for early career researchers, the more ethical, moral aspects and the societal impact is very fruitful. But for PIs, this payoff aspect, that actually the results are more robust, that it has a bigger impact if you translate it into the clinical population or so, would be more valuable and reasonable to imply.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Yeah. Anyone else would like to share? Dragana, please.
I think also top-down approaches have been very effective, such as including sex and gender questions in Marie Curie applications, and I think in the ERCs as well. I think for PI specifically, that seems to be an effective mechanism.
Exactly. Also on recruiting, you mean, right? So when recruiting new members for the group, exactly. Yeah, and maybe even perhaps having an EDI policy also for the group. So like a common set of values or a code of conduct for the group to follow. Yeah. Thank you so much. So we move on to the next point.
Okay, so before we just go to our next exercise, let's just briefly summarize the key takeaways from today's discussion. So data gaps are structural, not accidental, and research design reflects assumptions about whose lives matter. EDI improves scientific quality, not just fairness, and inclusion is not only about who is invited, but how participation is made possible. I think, can we zoom out the screen a little bit? So we will be doing a similar kind of exercise which we did in the beginning. So we just want you to reflect one or two strong insights that emerge from today's discussion.
Sorry, this Mentimeter is acting up a little bit. I tried to do it via here.
Okay,
So, yeah.
Yeah, so just we would just do the same thing. Just go ahead, and if you're not comfortable with the system, you can just write down in the chat. Yeah. I can see hopeful, action-driven, validation. There are a few more coming. Hopeful, yeah. Powered. Motivated. I really like all of those words.
Perfect.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
should we move on? Yeah. So thank you so much for your words. I agree. I also feel inspired and motivated to change things and to close the gap. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we wrap up, we would just like to invite you to join our LinkedIn group club in case if you have not yet joined. So this is a private group in which we try to have a bit of a discussion before our live sessions and after the live sessions as well. So as you see, we only had 1 hour to discuss so many interesting topics that Invisible Women covers. We had a ton of slides of different things we wanted to discuss, including design. So yeah, we will follow up on it in this group. And also please do join the group because we now also want to hear from you. So for Invisible Women and our first book club, we really chose the book within ourselves, within the EDIC members, but we want to hear your voice. So we want to include you in deciding what books you would like to read and to discuss next. So we want to host a next book club session in June. We already have a few ideas, so just as suggestions, but it's about you. So please do suggest. So yeah, join the group for that as well. And then get involved with our initiatives. So please ask us if there's anything regarding the book club or our initiatives that you would like to take part in or that you have a question on. Please do feel free to approach us. And by the end of this Zoom meeting, you will receive also a short survey. It should be very fast to answer, just with a little bit of feedback for us on how to continue with the book club. So we want to tailor it as much to your likings and the topics that you would like to see here covered. So please do give us feedback. It's important for us to act on it. Yeah, and finally, I would like to thank you all for joining. Indeed, this book, Invisible Women, and the discussions that we had here today really remind us that it's not just that who we don't really measure or whom we overlook. It's about how we include this in discussions within our peers, in our own work as well, and how it much impacts society and science. So this book is really a screaming call of action to change how to close the gap, basically, to change how the way that we do science really impacts in a positive way science and society both. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It was really fun to have you here. If you have not read the book, do it. I would really recommend. It's great, but it's also good to join if you haven't read, honestly, right? These topics affect us all, and with a good discussion, one can understand what are the topics that are covered. So I hope that for the ones that haven't read it, that you go find it and read it, because it's a great book. It's really mind-blowing. So thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to see you in our next editions. And please do let us know what you would like to read next, and give us feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Have a great
Thank